Okay, so maybe just a quick introduction of today's agenda, which is about safeguarding your business. We have done a two-part presentation. So I'm from CSA, and I'll talk through some of the global trends, help people to understand the threat landscape. And then depending on who you are, we have some tips for business owners and leaders, as well as for many of us, we're employees in a typical organization. After that, I'll hand the presentation over to our industry partner from CyberLitmus, who will walk through some of the hands-on scenario so that we can also appreciate what it takes to be protected from social engineering attacks. Okay, so without further ado, just to quickly walk through some of the trends, I think all of us here are enjoying the aftermath of the pandemic, where we are all resuming our lives. And I think what we can definitely say is that through the past 2 years, we have all been forced to go digital in a certain way, whether it's going grocery shopping, banking, and even the way we work. So I think people have been studying the result of the pandemic on digital transformation. And basically, there's some consensus that say that, oh, actually, it has accelerated digital transformation by about 7 years. So that's actually good in a way, because even in the pandemic, where businesses are locked down, and consumers are locked down, we can't really conduct our normal business, but yet we are able to do so with investment in digitalization. What it also means is that actually we're a lot more interconnected now today, and that increase in digitalization also then puts us into a new trajectory of cyber threats. Some examples, I think ransomware, for example, has reared its head in the cybersecurity industry, and we have seen a major increase in ransomware, where in the past ransomware used to be associated with slightly less sophisticated attacks, but increasingly the attacks have increased in scale as well as in sophistication. The others that I want to take attention to, because very pertinent to today's discussion, is actually the human factor. So we can put in place all the measures that we want, technically put in place the processes, but actually sometimes it really boils down to the human. And at least in this report that we looked at from Verizon, it says that actually the human breaches, or rather the human factor, is a cause of up to 82% of the breaches. So I think we as humans need to play our part as well to make sure that we're all cyber safe. Now, when we talk about what businesses are paying attention to, basically this is a report from the World Economic Forum that looks at various risks. It can be economic risk, environmental risk, geopolitical risk, and so on. And you would see that among the technological risks, actually cybersecurity failure is right at the top, and is basically a key concern for business leaders. So as our bosses are thinking about it, if any of you are business leaders, please make sure that you're also aware about it. And of course, us as employees, we need to do our part as well. So this is an overview of the cyber threats in 2021 in Singapore, and this is taken off our recently published cybersecurity landscape report. So it's a little bit busy, but just to take through a few examples. Earlier on, I talked about how ransomware has increased. We have also seen that quite a few of the targets of ransomware attacks are also the smaller businesses. So now that we have talked through the trends, talked about how cybersecurity is becoming more important as we live in an area where the cyber threats are increasing, let us learn about what are some practical measures that we can take to safeguard our businesses. So we always say that cybersecurity is not a single person or single entity's responsibility, but it's very much a collective responsibility. So in any organization, you can have your IT teams, and yes, they are responsible for rolling out quite a few initiatives and implementing many things. But it is not only their responsibility. Everybody, whether it's the boss or the employee, also needs to play a part, and let us see how. So this section here is for the business owners, business leaders. So if any of you in the room are basically in more senior positions where you get to have a say on, let's say, the budget in your organization or direction in your organization, we hope that you will pay attention here to some of these 4 measures that we have, which is about cultivating cybersecurity leadership, educating your employees, protecting your information assets, securing your access and environment, as well as ensuring that your business is cyber resilient. So let me just walk through each one to give a bit more details. So number 1 is cybersecurity leadership. And often we always say that it all starts from the top. As the boss, it's important to know what are the cyber threats that the organization faces, because only when you're aware, then you're able to take steps to protect your business, put in place or allow for the resources to be in there to protect the business, and more importantly, build that culture by leading by example. So basically demonstrate that you are cognizant about and basically you pay attention to cybersecurity so that your employees will also look up to you and they will also follow likewise. The next part is about equipping your employees so that they are also your first line of defense. Earlier on in the slides and the trends I showed, actually the human factor can be a huge factor. And we want to make sure that as much as we have put in place everything, our employees also help us to be our first line of defense. Next is about protecting your information assets. So one of the biggest things about assets is that it actually includes your hardware, your software, as well as your data. And very often, as we go about our day-to-day lives, we may not even think about keeping track of where our assets are or what are our assets. But this is actually foundational in making sure that we're cyber safe. Because if we don't even know that we have that asset, we wouldn't think about, oh, is there a vulnerability or an exploit in the asset, like for example, in our software, that will actually result in us being compromised. So I think this is one thing that we need to all pay attention to. Now that we know where our assets are, the next thing is how secure is the access and the environment? Do we have software that actually have unwittingly holes in the software people can enter? If yes, then we need to make sure that we close up these holes so that they are basically secure. Finally, in the area of resilience, we've always said that due to the rising threat landscape, actually cybersecurity incident is not a matter of if but when. So I think if this is a matter of not if but when, we have to accept that it's going to happen. And the question is, how do we react and how prepared are we to react when a cybersecurity incident happens? So this is where we want to suggest that it's useful to have an incident response plan so that you can practice ahead of time. Just like in a fire, we always make sure that we have a fire drill so that we practice ahead of time. We know what we need to do. Same thing for cybersecurity. It's important also to have a similar fire drill to make sure that we all know what to do when a cybersecurity incident happens. So moving on to the employees. Some of what I covered earlier may not be so relevant if maybe you don't play an influential role in the organization, but as employees, all of us are likely to be employees somewhere. This is probably something a bit more relevant to you. One of the top things that we want to suggest is to actually protect yourself from phishing. Usually when you read phishing emails, they usually know human psychology quite well, and they'll prey on things like a sense of urgency or a certain trust by having a notification that looks like it came from an authority like the government, your bank, or your services provider. So I think what we all want to be aware of is to be a bit more cognizant about such tricks that are played on us by social engineering attackers and make sure that we don't fall for those, just like the poor fish in the picture. Now, earlier on, I mentioned securing access, and one of the best ways to do it is to make sure that we have strong passphrases to protect them compared to a password. So if you look at the chart that we show here, if you move down in terms of the number of characters, the larger or the longer the number of characters, you see that it helps. And also, if you include special characters, it also helps in improving the strength of the password, which then makes it cyber safe because it's taking a longer to crack. However, I think the issue for most of us is that we're all human. If you give us a very long string with difficult characters, chances are we are not able to remember them. This is why the industry is actually shifting to a concept of passphrase, where we have a couple of tips for you. What you can do is to take 5 random words and then string them together and make sure that it is at least 12 characters long. And if you can, then mix it up with uppercase, lowercase characters, and some numbers with special characters, because all these then help to improve the strength of your passphrase. And this is similar to your door lock. When you go out, you want to make sure that you have a secure door lock to protect your belongings. And likewise in the digital world, your passphrase is the equivalent of your strong door lock. So we have published other tips to help employees. I've covered protecting yourself from phishing, setting strong passphrases and protecting them, as well as protecting your corporate and personal devices. Especially for many of us, we may potentially use our personal device like our mobile phones to access corporate information. And sometimes we're not so careful about the distinction between what is corporate and personal, or sometimes worse, we lose our personal devices, which actually compromises the corporate information as well. So tip number 3 is to really be aware of that and protect your personal devices, especially if you use it for work. work. Number 4 is about reporting cyber incidents, because employees actually help to form the ears and mouth of the organization. IT teams cannot be everywhere, but we can help to spot suspicious things and report. Others would be area of making sure that we're aware about data, especially business critical data, how to handle and disclose carefully. And number 6 is really the fact that all of us are now very much in a hybrid work environment, sometimes physically in the office and sometimes telecommuting. So as we telecommute, also to make sure that we are doing it in a safe manner. And the tips that we have here are listed on our cybersecurity toolkit for employees. The URL is listed on this slide over here. So I think what you can see is that we have taken a fairly guided approach to help organizations at different stages of the cybersecurity journey. So starting with awareness, and all of us can play a part, starting the next taking action, and then finally in the area of adoption. So maybe this is not so much for the individuals who are here, but if any of you are basically working in an ICT function or a cybersecurity function in your organization, this could be relevant to you, that we have launched a cybersecurity certification for organizations earlier this year in the form of Cyber Essentials and Cyber Trust. So basically, what it does is that it actually brings forward and it makes more visibly your investment in cybersecurity and helps to build trust with customers so that you can give your customers the assurance that you're being cyber safe. And this then basically becomes a competitive edge for the business. So Cyber Essentials is targeted at organizations that are usually smaller, still starting in the journey. So the design construct is that we try to make it simpler and more achievable for organizations. So things like measures like assets, secure, protect, updating, backup and respond have been included. And these are the things that we make sure that we emphasize and prioritize that you focus on first, because this will help you be protected against common cybersecurity attacks. As a certification program, it is valid for 2 years, and basically we have appointed certification bodies to walk through the assessment in an independent manner, and this is done through a desktop assessment process. So basically, this is just a quick visual of the report that's generated from a self-assessment. So for any of you that happen to be in more technical functions in your organization, you may want to check this out. This is basically a spreadsheet that accompanies the standard certification. You can download it, it's free, walk through it, see where you are in terms of your cybersecurity posture, and where after you complete it, you will generate a report that looks like this to tell you where are some areas that you have done well, what are some of the areas that are gaps that you may still want to look into. And with that, I've come to the end of my presentation. Thank you very much, and I think this is a good time for me to hand this over to CyberLitmus to actually walk through a bit more of the hands-on scenarios in terms of social engineering attacks. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. And if everyone may allow me, I will now try to share my screen. And thank you so much, Veronica, for that wonderful sharing. And I hope that what I'll be sharing next will give also some insight into what it may look like, on what cybersecurity awareness may look like in an organizational setting. So we're CyberLitmus, and our organization, our company, aims to help organizations to build their security awareness programs painlessly. So this is the problem today that Veronica has already illustrated. Phishing is involved in 36% of breaches. Almost 66% of people use the same password across multiple accounts, and only 4% of people can differentiate a phishing email from a legitimate email. This is exacerbated by the fact that 96% of phishing attacks arrive via email. However, training people to recognize these attacks is time-consuming, resource-intensive, sometimes painful, and too often a low priority. And we hope to be able to, and we hope to work together to change this. So why is this important? Reputational damage, business disruption, the loss of information, and also to meet various compliance requirements. And of course, on a fifth note, things like the cybersecurity certifications, such as the Cyber Trust mark, as well as the Cyber Essentials that the CSA has launched. These factors come together really critically because they are now increasingly considered as part of the main business activities and no longer considered a separate function from your business. So who we are? So I'm Kian. I'm the co-founder and CEO of the company, and of course my partner Eugene, co-founder and CTO. So we bring together education and cybersecurity expertise to have started this company, and we hope to be sharing a bit more about our insights with you right now. So this is what our security awareness program looks like. It consists of 3 core elements. Number 1, phishing simulations. Number 2, bite-sized microlearning. And number 3, leak breach monitoring. These 3 elements work holistically to bring you a complete, best-in-class program against cybersecurity threats. Very much like what Veronica has mentioned earlier, it very much serves as a form of fire drill in the context of the phishing simulations, so that you would know what a potential attack may look like, how to respond to it, and to give everyone a safe environment to be practicing their ability to identify these threats. So over here is a simulation that we've created that we've sent to ourselves. So there are a couple of things here to look at. I'll just give everyone about 20 seconds to look at this. So like in the example that Veronica shared earlier as well, there was an image of a fisherman with a subscription billing notification being dropped into the ocean. Okay, so I will now get to this. So this simulation was sent via our platform, and it's designed to replicate Netflix billing information expired notification. So you will see that there are a few things that are interesting about this to note. Number 1 is the sender address. You will see that this is actually sent by an email address that looks like MailChimp, which is an email automation platform. But I can see that L has been replaced with a 1. And you will see that this, of course, does not match the Netflix subscription logos as well as the notifications over here. And it will, of course, have a call to action asking you to renew your membership. If not, they will suspend your Netflix membership within the next 48 hours. So there is a sense of urgency as well as an appeal to authority over here from Netflix. So once this button is clicked, renew membership, what you will end up at is a page that looks like this via our platform. You'll be directed to a page that looks like the actual Netflix landing page. However, you will also see that the URL over here is also something that resembles MailChimp. It is in fact the same domain that you've seen earlier, mai1chimp.com. And once you input your email as well as your password, we will lock this activity and track that this activity has occurred. And this will then be presented in a report so that the organizations can have an understanding of this and take the necessary action to upskill people who are vulnerable to this particular phishing simulation. So in this particular scenario, you will see that we have sent that one email, that original phishing email with the Netflix notification of suspension. And after that, I had clicked the email, open, and within that email, I clicked the link to say log into my account to fix it. And finally, on that landing page, if I had keyed in some form of information in the username as well as the password field, we would log that as a compromised instance. So there'll be a report like this that will be generated across the organization. So if let's say you have 100 people, you will see that 100 emails were sent. A certain percentage will have opened the email because not everybody goes through every single email, and it may be marked off as a less important email. And of course, a certain percentage would not end up clicking the link. And finally, a much smaller percentage should be clicking on the compromise. Should be clicking on the final login page that will be logged as being a compromise scenario. So this gives insight into who are the vulnerable users within the organization. Now, how do we actually work upon this to reduce the rate of compromise? So the other component that we have within the system is the microlearning component. So in this instance, we'll be sharing about the passphrases as the new passwords scenario. That was also shared in a bit more detail earlier on as well. So we built this platform that is able to deliver these modules straight into your browsers. So you do not have to log in to any into LMS. And this becomes quite helpful for people who are continuously on the go and have only pockets of time to be undergoing this training. So over here, we have passphrases as a new password. So it works very much like an Instagram story. So if you were to click right, you would then go into the next into the next screen. So passphrases are more secure than passwords. They are typically longer and made of random words rather than individual characters in passwords. So over here we have also aligned with what CSA sharing. So at least 12 characters long, including upper, lowercase, numbers, and special characters, and usually made up of 5 random words. These are the key characteristics of a passphrase. And these are important because they are the first barrier to prevent unauthorized access to information. The stronger the passphrases, the better the defenses are against cyber attackers getting into them, getting to accounts. Password length or complexity, which is better? Longer passwords have more uncertainty in the combination, which makes it more challenging to crack, whereas more complex passwords are harder to remember and easier to crack as we tend to use predictable sequences. So over here, we will be doing a quick question. Which of the following is the best example of a passphrase? We have 3 options here. So we'll give everyone some time to complete this. Okay, shall I continue? There we go. Okay, so we've now got the results in. So the majority of the people have actually chosen the option in the middle. So the one in the middle actually is what you would consider a password with more complex characters in it. Very much like what we were sharing earlier, a passphrase actually would contain up to 5 random words. And the reason why we do this is because the length is a very critical component in password complexity. And it is also important to make sure that you have a password that you can actually remember, so that you can access things like your password managers, etc. Moving forward. So in this scenario, the last option is actually the correct option. Because it's long, it's complex, and also easier to remember than the rest. So just another quick question. Which of the following is true? We'll be having a poll up as well. So you've got multi-factor authentication should be used at all times. So this would refer to something like using a password and then receiving an OTP. And the second one would be passphrases should be shared to my family and friends. Okay, great. We've just got the poll results come in. So most of us have picked the multi-factor authentication. MFA should be used at all times option, which is the accurate answer, and this is the reason. The use of multiple keys helps to strengthen security and helps to protect software from being compromised. And finally, for passphrases and passwords, only you should know your passphrases and passwords. No one else should have access to it. Thank you, and now moving on. So after this, we will be sharing some key ideas around how to set a strong password, on how to set a strong passphrase. So first of all, containing at least 12 characters, because length is one of the most important determinants of password complexity. Secondly, mixing it up with lowercase numbers and special characters is also one way to do this. Using at least 5 random words that only you can remember. Fourth, and making it very unpredictable. So you have to be creative about this at times as well. Perhaps an incident that only you would know, or a story that only you would know, to help you remember the passphrase. And finally, make it unique. So to make it unique means that you do not want to be using the same story that you suspect that there could be other people who would know this, and this would very much help in making your passphrase more secure. And finally, we will go into one final poll question, which is a strong passphrase. So we have 3 options. Okay, thank you. The results have come in. So most of us have picked the first option, which is in this case the correct option. And the reason for this is because the passphrase contains unrelated and randomly ordered words, whereas some of us have picked the second option, which says animals are the best. And because this is grammatically correct in a sequence, it actually makes the password easier to guess. Because once you get to, for example, animals are the, it is very much possible that best is one of the words that can be combined to it. If an attacker were to try to guess your password, both in a brute force manner as well as logical sequence manner. And finally, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is the most common password in the world, and so please do not use that. And I'm very happy that no one has chosen that option. Okay. So when this is done, what we would create is actually a report that shares about how the organization's microlearning progress has been going. So you see that every month we'll be sending a module like this, which can be completed about 3 to 5 minutes. We'll have an open rate, we have a completion rate, as well as a pass rate, and also the average amount of time spent. So every organization will be then working towards maximizing your opening rate, because that's simply opening the course, starting the module. And then completing the course should also be 100%. And finally, the pass rate should be as high as possible over time. And this will help people in organization to have a very strong baseline understanding of cybersecurity awareness. And for us, with this platform that we have, all we really need is for the organization to share with us the email addresses of the users before the start of the campaign, and we'll be able to run all these exercises. So really, cybersecurity awareness does not have to be difficult. It can be really easy. So over here, just a sample of what we would potentially be doing for your organization if we were to work together. We'll be, of course, sharing a simulation exercise. We'll be sharing security awareness content, including the bite-sized learning module. We'll be sharing some key learning points with a conclusion of the various simulation exercises and the micro-learning modules as part of a fire drill, what Veronica mentioned earlier. And finally, sharing a management report so that the organization can know who are the vulnerable users and what are the most appropriate and relevant next steps to take. So there are many ways to do this, and this is one of the ways. And thank you very much. That I've now come to the end of the CyberLitmus component of the presentation.
So I think one of the questions was about the assessment questions for the Cyber Essentials mark, and are they shared online? So yes, it is. It is on a spreadsheet that is accompanying the Cyber Essentials mark standards document, and both documents, the Word document as well as the spreadsheet, are shared online so that you can read it and basically go through the self-assessment. There was another question also on the certification that asked about the news of personal data breach and whether organizations with cyber certification, are they more safe, or can customers expect additional safeguards when the organization is certified? So I think firstly, no matter what we do, I've mentioned earlier that it's not a matter of if but when. So I think we all have to be prepared that there will always be a breach, and that includes certified organizations. However, the benefit with certified organizations is that you have the assurance that they have put in place some of the minimum requirements in terms of not just the technology, but all three: people, process, technology, to ensure that the systems and the data stays protected. Yep. Okay, there was one question on free cybersecurity software to install. Okay, so if this is from the context of organizations, there are some grant funding that's available for organizations to basically implement pre-approved cybersecurity solutions under the SMEs Go Digital program. For literally members of the public and end user for end users, literally at this point in time, there is no official CSA partnership with any. But having said that, I do know of quite a few industry partners who actually have basically a limited license, like a certain constrained kind of license, where some of these software is available for free. Okay, maybe there was another question on the mark. Will the Cyber Essential mark be considered as a mitigation factor under the PDPA's framework, similar to IMDA's Data Protection Trust mark? So this is something that we've consulted our colleagues in IMDA and PDPC on. So generally, when they consider basically some of the mitigation measures that an organization has put in place to protect themselves, they would consider things like whether you've gone for cyber certification, gone for data protection. So in that regard, yes. However, as the authority on this, we always want to stress that this is not your get out of jail card. I think end of the day, it should be it can be considered as a mitigating factor, but we should all be alert and make sure that we also have our our incident response plan in place as well, so that we are prepared against a breach. Okay, there's an interesting, okay, I think this one, Kin Chong, I think you're going to answer this, so you might want to take this about the cracking our strong passphrases. I was just scrolling through.
Thank you, Veronica. So we have a question: if strong passphrases can take millenniums to crack, does it mean we don't need to change our passwords regularly anymore? So it's true that it can take millenniums to crack using, for example, current computing power, and this is not to be taken for granted because computing power is increasing. And very soon, with newer computing power, these passphrases will be getting easier and easier to crack. And also, there are people around the world working on things like this, continuously trying to crack into your systems. So if let's say there are, let's say 10,000 people working on the same account at the same time, it's not going to take a million to crack, because everybody are going to be working on this in different perspectives. So really, that time period that you see is really just an indication of how difficult it will be. But certainly, with enough resources, a lot of these passwords can be cracked. Therefore, it is important to be changing your password regularly still. Veronica, would you like to add on to that? I mean, if there's anything.
Not really. I was just going to share a couple of examples, but maybe yeah, it's not really that relevant. Yeah, I'm good with this.
Okay.
Okay, there's some related question on signing up services via Google or password. So I think generally the passphrase try to follow the guidelines that we shared to make it a bit more complicated and basically harder to crack. Also is that quite commonly nowadays, there's a question on the grants for SMEs. So just give me a moment. Let me pull out the link so we can just paste it here. Okay, there was a question about how safe is it to store passwords in browsers. So I think Kian Chong made the excellent point about using password managers to store the password so that it minimizes your temptation to reuse it and recycle it. Password browsers actually have something similar, but you have to consider this browser or this device that you're using. How shared is it? How public, how open it is, or is it dedicated to you? So if it's something that is a very open machine, like many people are using it, actually, I think what would be safer would be to put it in a passphrase in your password manager. Okay, there was a big question about geographic borders. So the question is that cyber threats do not respect geographic borders. Is there a law that could be sufficient or effective for regulating cyberspace and conflicts? So I think increasingly we are seeing that nations are coming out with their respective cybersecurity regulations and laws and so on. In Singapore, there's a Cybersecurity Act applicable to the critical information infrastructure, which would refer to infrastructure that basically take care of the delivery of essential services, things like banking, utilities, and so on. And increasingly, we're seeing that different countries around the world do have things like that. So at this point in time, maybe it's not a universal law, but I think different countries are basically putting out their respective regulation. And there's quite a bit of G2G collaboration across the different countries in order to share experience, exchange pointers, and to achieve that cross-border collaboration. So I think collectively, we did say that cybersecurity is well, a collective responsibility. So everyone is trying to come together across geographical borders as well to see what we can do to tackle it a bit more effectively in our respective jurisdiction.
There was a question on recommended password managers. I would say it's that there are many reputable password managers out there, and if you were to look for one, there are some that have been established for a really long time with a long history, and those are the ones that I would suggest looking at first. Yeah, they're actually readily accessible. Yeah, if you just search password manager on Google. I've just seen also a question on the use of authenticators. By this, I'm going to assume that it refers to the use of, let's say, 2FA, having your OTP. Is it still necessary password managers I use? I think the answer is yes, it's still necessary. Firstly, on the layer of the password manager, so that you have your passphrase and then you have that authenticator for you to even enter the password manager in the first place. Another form of authentication could be, for example, biometrics. So well, for sure that it's very high likelihood that you are the actual one and using the password manager. And then within that password manager, there are many other accounts and passwords that are automatically generated by the password manager. So you don't have to remember those passwords. And it is also usually quite seamless to also implement a 2FA feature on each individual account, right? That, let's say, tags back to your OTP device, or maybe some form of a biometric on your phone. So yes, it is still necessary, and it's also quite easy to do so as well.
Okay, there's a question, again, a bit more career related on somebody with a mid-career switch, no cybersecurity background, but wishes to basically enter into this industry. I guess two things. One is the theory behind it. So there are quite a few of these online courses that are nowadays a bit more free available. So this would be a good starting point to pick up on the theory. The second would be a little bit of those hands-on exercise. I know that they do this quite a bit for students in the form of capture the flag competitions, but industry partners also do something like that, not necessarily for students, but for people who basically, have some interest in the hands-on. So this would be some of the good starting points to pick up both the theory as well as the hands-on in order to get initiated into cybersecurity. But I suppose at the end of the day, it's also then a matter of understanding what is the fit with the various roles in cybersecurity. Sometimes when people think of cybersecurity, they think of the hacker wearing the hoodie and doing something. So this is just one aspect of roles in cybersecurity. There are other roles as well. Some companies I know, for example, recently I met this company who was bringing on cybersecurity talent, and they were telling me that what they were lacking is people who can actually communicate and tell stories about cybersecurity and basically make this topic come alive. So I think there are different types of, there's a whole range of roles within cybersecurity. So I think the other part is apart from the technical hands-on as well as the theory, also then be familiar with the different range of roles available so that you can find something that best fits yourself in terms of where your strengths are, or maybe in your your current career or what you're doing today, a good match, but just adjacent. So this would be some good starting points.
And if I may just add on there as well, if you are keen to explore the field and you're not sure whether it's something you definitely want to do yet, there are a lot of cybersecurity resources, from the CSA website, SkillsFuture, etc. that you can look into to get a sort of baseline understanding, and you can be directed to the most relevant resources to support your mid-career switch. There was also a question on the use of third-party platforms and any advice on cybersecurity on that aspect. So I think first of all is making sure that the third-party platform that you're working with has the various cybersecurity practices in place. Do they have some form of certification? Do they share about what they're doing with regard to cybersecurity? And also be important to, for example, perhaps get something like like a leak breach monitoring system, so that you would know if that information were ever compromised, and so that you can take action quickly and run your incident response plan on your organization. There was also a question on quantum computing that maybe I will just quickly touch on. So I think quantum computing is really it's probably coming our way. Its password still the way to go. I think at this point it's very hard to say when it's going to arrive. However, in the meantime, passwords and our existing authentication methods are what we have, and we have to use them to their full potential. So things like 2FA, MFA techniques, etc., are still the best way to keep you protected right now.
If I may just chip into this, is that just recently, not too long ago, we were reading articles about some of the major technology vendors also looking into passwordless technology, because the standards have just been being ironed out. But some of these would take time to come out. So as Kencho mentioned, for now, these are what we have. Let's stick to it. But obviously, technology will move, and we will always have to adjust and adapt our methodology in order to make sure that we are basically on top of the situation. So watch out for some of these interesting developments.